Good evening. Are we living in a Keir Starmer dictatorship? Rumours were swirling that Labour was going to cancel the local elections in England.
Why aren't they all going ahead?
And I would say, even before the white paper has been published,
maybe there's a problem with the line. Why aren't they going ahead, Minister?
Well, at the moment, the assumption is that elections are going ahead. However, it's usual in a process of reorganisation that when a council makes a request for reorganisation, that if there are elections taking place to a council that it essentially won't exist within the term of those elections, then you hold off the elections and you elect to a shadow body, and the shadow body basically is a form of the new councils that will follow.
And now we appear to have confirmation on this. Some local elections due to take place in May next year might now be delayed until 2027. Labour says that they want to postpone them because they're restructuring the councils. Some might not exist in a couple of years' time. But this excuse doesn't really wash. So these local elections were seen as a referendum on Keir Starmer's government. He's currently the most unpopular Prime Minister of modern times with an approval rating of somewhere in the region of -61. And this graph actually shows just how quickly his popularity has nosedived. He is sinking like the Titanic, and Labour are fearful of a monumental kicking in May. Angela Rayner has tried to spin this. She says this is all part of devolution and she's giving power back to the communities. Well, Reform MP Rupert Lowe struck back, stating the bleeding obvious. You don't give power back to communities by cancelling elections, Angela. This is unbelievably rich coming from Labour. Over the weekend, Labour's very own Baroness Harriet Harman was all over the media saying that Nigel Farage and Reform were a threat to democracy.
Well, I think people should be very concerned about Reform because they're not just a threat to individual parties, but I actually think they're a threat to democracy because they are offering easy answers.
And now they are set to, apparently, cancel local elections in Essex, Hertfordshire, Kent, Lancashire and Sussex. The cynic in me would say this: Labour are tanking. Starmer's handling of the summer disorder, his freezing of pensioners, crippling of farmers, relentless desire to give your money, taxpayers' money, away abroad, which included another 50 million quid to Syria yesterday, the Lord Ali Sleaze and Donergate fiasco, Ed Miliband's big green revolution, and, frankly, his total lack of personality mean that he's currently in the toilet. Meanwhile, Reform UK are surging. They're up 7 points since the general election. I mean, they actually have done rather well, haven't they? This will terrify the Labour government. Now, remember when Keir Starmer said this.
It's right that Parliament has the first say. It's right that Parliament has the first say. But if we need to break the impasse, our options must include campaigning for a public vote, and nobody is ruling out Remain as an option.
Yep, that's him there talking about a second Brexit referendum. The Prime Minister has a track record of not liking it when the public, or the great unwashed, as he may refer to them, vote the wrong way. Cancelling the local elections could be his attempt to make sure they don't even get a chance to vote at all. Is he behaving like a proper Prime Minister or a tin pot dictator? Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. We, of course, have the wonderful journalist and broadcaster Carol Malone. We've got commentator and writer Benjamin Butterworth and the associate editor at the Daily Express, Sam Lister. Carol, is he behaving a bit like a dictator?
Oh, my God, yeah. This is what happens in dictatorships. He's acting like, a third world dictator. It's incredible because dictators are very strong people, and he's not at all. He literally can't. Reform, as you said, are surging ahead. Reform now has 100,000 members in this country. The Labour Party has 366,000, so that gives you an idea of how much the support is surging for him. And I think, Harriet Harman at the weekend, that is pot calling the kettle black here. She said Reform is a threat to democracy. What the Labour Party do now is a huge threat to democracy. And interesting, a couple of days before that, Harman had been on another show and she had praised Reform and said they were surging ahead and were actually a danger to Labour. And that is absolutely true. And Labour have seen this. They know what's happening. The Reform Party is what happens in a country where the ruling party is not listening to the needs and the wants of the electorate. And you pointed pointed out, the most unpopular Prime Minister in modern historic times. So, yes, I think, when you have a government, this is a dangerous government, and when you have a government that actually can't rule the country, but is going to stop the people who can, we shouldn't be having
Benjamin, Keir Starmer's getting the kind of spanking you normally have to pay for in Soho, and he doesn't like it. That's why he's trying to avoid an election.
Yeah, I think people that have come to these conclusions have been on the Christmas sherry early. The idea that it's like a dictator, I don't remember Putin cancelling a few district council elections.
If Putin did this, but it's interesting because I nearly put a line in my monologue actually about this. If Putin did this, they'd be all over it like a rash. But it's actually Keir Starmer doing it.
This is actually called gerrymandering. This is what we used to call gerrymandering, where you manipulate boundaries to get the vote you want.
Well, the last Tory government know about that because they tried to cut the number of MPs to make it impossible for a Labour government to get in. But, I mean, this is just total nonsense. What you've got here is, 5 district councils being redrawn in 5 areas of the country so that you can save £2 billion of public money. Now, it's the case that whenever you redraw local authority boundaries, you might have to delay the elections. That is just how it works. That's how it works, whoever does it.
The Tories said they refused to do that.
The idea that people, ordinary people, as politicians like to speak of, are going to be writing to Santa begging for Thurrock District Council to be saved. I tell you what, look at what the turnout was. It was about 25% of people even bothered to vote in the last elections. The idea that a couple of people moaning should mean that we spend £2 billion more on local authorities is everything that's wrong with this country.
I see you're itching to get involved in.
Well, I mean, if we reverse this and say Nigel Farage was Prime Minister and he was delaying this, do you think the left would respond quite so positively as they are doing now? These areas, Essex and Kent, are key areas, Lancashire, the key areas where reform is expected to do well. And it's no surprise that Labour has conveniently found a way of shoving this down the track 2 years. Now, if we were to be charitable and take them at face value, and this is just a reorganisation, there's nothing anti-democratic about it. Essentially, what you're saying, if local councils are important, then why would you delay people's say on it? In 2 years' time, a council can go bankrupt. If you look at places like Croydon, people having their council tax put up by... Croydon Council has gone bankrupt 3 times. People are having to pay 15% extra on their council tax bills because of how it's being run. So we have to have the right to kick these people out.
And in Windsor and Maidenhead, they're looking at putting the council at 25%. Do the public there get to say, hang on a minute, I want to defer that to you?
We'll wait 2 years.
And this does not serve local people, because some of these authorities, when they merge, would be 500,000 plus people. When the councils can't serve 200,000 people, they sure as hell aren't going to be able to serve 500,000 very well.
Yeah, exactly. Look, if Keir Starmer was not personal approval rating of -61, if he was flying high at the minute, there's no way he'd be cancelling these elections. Is Nigel Farage not right when he says this is a bit dodgy?
No, I'm old enough to remember when Nigel Farage said that he wanted fewer politicians and fewer or less layers of government, right? But now there's no bandwagon he won't jump on to get a cheap and easy headline. That's all you're seeing here. The idea of restructuring a couple of local authorities where we know that most people don't know the difference in what they go to with their problems between district and county councils. These things are a mess.
Why not have a vote at all? Why not have a vote at all if nobody cares?
They don't know what they're voting for anyway. Is this not just classic left wing?
Your arguments, you would never change it. Right? You would never...
Do you think more people will vote once it's been restructured? I mean, I think...
Yeah, we see that because directly elected mayors tend to get better turnout than local councils.
But the problem is, for the directly elected mayors in rural parts of the country, how on earth is somebody in one part of East Anglia supposed to expect the representation that they're going to get in the opposite part of East Anglia? These are big areas of the country, and it's crazy.
No coincidence that the polls have predicted that Reform are going to win seats in these local elections, in the mayoral elections, and lots of seats in Scotland. So they're doing it just like I've heard that.
These elections were going to be branded as a referendum on Keir Starmer's performance so far. And frankly, it's been woeful. And that's not a controversial thing to say. Look at the polls, look at the catalogue of things that he's done. They were probably going to get a kicking now. And you're right to mention some of those areas. We're doing a segment shortly, actually, on... It's turned out, there's been some research, that 40% of jobs in the Red Wall are apparently taken by migrant workers. Well, who do you think the Red Wall might be inclined to vote for now? Potentially Reform. Where's Lancashire? The Red Wall. Obviously, people in Essex, I imagine, aren't particularly chuffed about that kind of thing. Suffolk, big farming area. So the list goes on, doesn't it? And this is a problem for Labour. They can't let it happen. They can't let a vote happen.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm to be completely completely charitable to Labour. I don't think they've gone about reorganising local government to manipulate the local council elections. But what they have seen is an opportunity here to allow this to be delayed by up to 2 years. They could say very clearly that actually, no, democracy is important, people's right to vote is important, we will go ahead come what may. It doesn't matter if you reorganise. But we've all been writing the stories about how Reform have got the momentum. They are ruthlessly organised now in a way that they've never been before. They were expecting to have the momentum in May, and that's important because Keir Starmer is going to expected to get a drubbing. And if you lose momentum in politics, that is really, really very serious.
It's terrifying, Labour, that Nick Candy is now taking on the job of Treasurer. He's going to get them 40 million quid. He's promised to make Farage Prime Minister. They must be, I was nearly said a bad word there, they must be quaking in their boots.
Look, I'm just glad that all these Reform cheerleaders have suddenly discovered the value of a ballot box, because 2 weeks ago they were all saying that signing an online petition should decide who runs the country and not the 30 million people that voted in July.
Do you know what really upsets me? That Angela Rayner is the housing minister and she's responsible for all this. I mean, you know, the woman is not a bright woman, and yet we're allowing her to tear this country up. And she's, and you know.
Well, you know, Angela Rayner is not here to defend herself.
Well, it doesn't matter.
She would probably say that she is indeed a bright woman.
Well, she's not. She left school at 16 with nothing.
Well, okay.
So she's
all right. Okay.
Good for her. Good for her.
The only thing I will, I'm not exactly an Angela Rayner cheerleader, and in fact, I am a cheerleader of you, to be fair. The only thing I will say is I think Lord Sugar left school at 16.
He did, yeah.
So
but he has proved himself. Angela Rayner has not.
A point well made. Now.